Oftentimes we're trying to maximize our light output when out on the trail, and the V3 mirror light kit from Freedom Outfitters does just that. The V3 mirror light drop-in kit was made for the average FJ Cruiser driver or the experienced off-roader. And now before I dive in, I do want to say that this is a majority how to install video. So if you want to see that, go skip ahead to the end and you can go find that section there. But before I do that, I do want to dive into specs. So essentially what this is Freedom Outfitters made a assembly, or a bracket I should say, that goes in an FJ Cruiser mirror, and that houses a Diodynamics SSC1. Now first of all, I love Diodynamics. I actually have a lot of their lights on one of my other vehicles, and the quality is amazing. They have a great warranty, and it's also made in America, which is a huge bonus to me. So specifically, this is the wide version of the SSC1, so it does cast a pretty wide light, which is perfect for where it's located, and I will go into that later. But this is also the Pro version, so it casts a ton of light, and you'll see that in the footage that I'm playing here. So when you order this kit, you might be asking, well, what color backlight are you getting? Well, as of right now on Freedom Outfitters site, you get a white backlit SSC1, and that's honestly perfect for what I need. It looks great, so when you're driving, that can be your daytime running lights, and it kind of replaces the look of the old orange one, and in my opinion, it still looks great. And because the beam is so wide and the location is back here towards the driver, it is perfect to be a ditch light of sorts. It might not totally replace your ditch lights, but it can work perfectly as it's wide enough to kind of see everything. And for me personally, after running these, I don't see any need for me to run a ditch light, so that is perfect for my needs. One of the other cool things I found when on a trip is you can actually use this to kind of pivot and scan the surroundings around you to your left or right if you have a passenger to turn the mirror, but you just kind of pivot the mirror and you can see a lot of things decently far out, and that makes it nice if you're kind of on a trail and you just want to see something quick. Or honestly, I've used it to read a sign before, to kind of turn it and you can read a sign that's next to you, so it is perfect for that. And I also use it a lot for just camping and the camp ambiance and environment. It adds a little glow to the campsite, but you can also put the wide light on if you're setting something up or trying to make dinner or something. It is great for a normal camp light. Now me personally, I can't really find a downside to these mirror lights. They just work great in every scenario. They are a nice little benefit to the mirrors. It's nice you don't have to add a bunch of different lights onto your vehicle. It's just kind of a little add-on that's already there. It's in a space that's already was being used, and now you get more light from it, so that is nice. The only thing that might be a little bit of a downside for you is that it does require some installation and it does require some time. Now this wasn't a huge downside to me, but this might be for you. If you like working on vehicles, this is an easy installation, very easy, but I would set aside maybe 2 to 3 hours to get it done. But overall, you do need to just kind of take your time, get the mirror part, get the light in, and get the wiring done. And the wiring for some of you might be the worst part depending on what your setup is, but otherwise it is just a solid mirror light and I love it. All right, and now for installing the Freedom Outfitters V3 mirror lights. I want to keep this section short but also very informative. I want to give you as much information as possible, show you as much as detail as possible in a short amount of time. That way I'm not boring you to death with me talking. So let's just dive right in. All right, and before we go any further, I do want to quickly discuss what's inside the box. So the first thing you'll find is the actual mirror kit from Freedom Outfitters. It's the V3 mirror kit. It's the pieces of 3D printed plastic that will essentially put your Diodynamics SSC1 into your mirror for the FJ Cruiser. So, and that's the other thing, you will see a box from Diodynamics. It's an SSC1, and it's essentially the light that you chose to fit in your mirror. And obviously they will also send a wire harness for that. We're gonna dive into more of that later and show you how I'm going to essentially use that wiring harness in this FJ, but it could be different depending on your setup. So just keep that in mind. The install will be the same, but the wiring will probably be different for you, depending on what you're doing with battery and power management. But regardless, let's get started on step one. And the first thing I'm gonna do, which might not make a bunch of sense, but stick with me here, I'm gonna take off the door panels. And the reason that is because I want to fit the wiring harness from the mirror through this little boot here that goes into the main cabin of the FJ. And so to effectively do that, I wanna have these panels off so I can just drop the wires right through, shove it through the boot and into the interior, and then we're good to go. So I'm not gonna go too in depth on how to take these panels off because it's not that complicated, but essentially you just pop these two covers. There's 2 screws underneath, and then there's a push pin on this side of the door over here, and then you just pry this whole door off, and I'll kind of show you that. But again, it's nothing too crazy. All right, so those 2 screws are pretty simple. I'm just gonna get rid of this one clip here, and then this door will be coming right off. Just to pull the clips a little bit, and then boom, it's off. And you have to disconnect the wiring harnesses, obviously. Now again, I'm gonna do both sides at the same time, so you don't have to rewatch everything. Just do the same steps for now on both sides, and you'll be good. All right, and I will say before unplugging any of the wiring, I forgot to mention this in the earlier part, but make sure your windows are rolled up because you will need to reach under them to pull wires. So just make sure the windows are rolled up, then you can unplug, and then you're going to take the panel off. All right, now that the interior door panel is apart, it is time to take apart this mirror. So it's pretty simple. So what you want to do is you want to bend this mirror backwards to get a good angle on it, and then you're essentially going to take the bottom of this and just pull out, and this mirror is going to come right out. All right, so you just want to take this, pull up. There we go, it should drop out just like that. All right, and then from there, you will just take out these 3 screws. There's one here that I'm taking out, there's one right here, and there's one right over in here. Okay, once those 3 are out, you are going to essentially just pry this off. It's a little bit tough, I will say that, but there we go. It should come out. And there's a lot of mud falling out too. But now we're into the inner portion of the mirror, and we can take out the old light and install the new one. Once that is out, you're gonna take this little screw out here, and that is for the actual light that is already installed. And this might be a little bit of a challenge here as it is in a tight spot. So I'm just gonna remove this wiring harness right here. All right, now for the installation section, I actually just installed the other side. I wanted to make sure I had everything nailed down. That way I could give you guys the best tips possible on how to do this. So, first thing I would do is I would grab all the pieces you need. So you need this little housing for the light, you need the actual Diodynamics light, and you need the little bracket where you mount the light. And then also the hardware to mount it. And the first thing you're gonna wanna do is take your bracket. Now we need to figure out which bracket is which. So let me take you to the mirror and show you which bracket fits which side. All right, in order to figure out which side the bracket goes on, you're gonna wanna look at the flat part. So you can see that right here is that little flat section. That's gonna be where the actual light is facing outwards. So you're gonna want that towards the outside of this mirror housing. So spin it around, flat side is now up top, and that's going towards the outside. And you can see here that this lines up perfectly with these holes. And also you're gonna see that your light is going to be straight out, which is obviously what you want. It's gonna be straight, it's not gonna be at a weird angle. It's gonna be going straight out towards the front. Okay, and then the biggest thing I learned from doing the other side is that you should kind of put this assembly together out here or outside of the housing and then bolt it into the housing once that is done. So essentially how it's done is you're gonna take your little housing piece for the actual light, and you're gonna take your light and you're gonna slide that in. And it'll actually slide in pretty well. It won't snap in, but it will be snug and you'll feel it get tight. So right there, that's how it's gonna look. And then again, you're gonna take the flat part and you're going to put that facing outwards towards the light. So it's gonna look something like that from the top. Essentially, it's just gonna slide right in your light housing and you'll be good to go. Now what I've noticed so far is that it's probably best to slide this in at the back. Kind of leave it like that, spin it around, and put the lock washer and then the nut on. And then you'll want to take your 7mm wrench and just kind of clamp that down right in there to hold that. And then take an Allen and just kind of tighten that up. And obviously I'll have to straighten it out once before it gets too tight. But you want to make sure it's kind of straight up top and also level. And then the final step I did, which is just honestly a bonus step that you don't have to do, but I put some double-faced foam kind of around this edge to just help seal it up. And honestly, I just did that because I saw that on the old lights. I thought that's probably a smart idea to have some sort of sealing. on it, but that's not a necessary thing, just something I wanted to do. But let's go ahead and slide this in and put it together. All right, and after sliding that in, just make sure that this is lined up over here. And then the only bolt you can actually, or say screw that you can actually put in is the one right here. And that is because the other ones do connect to the outer housing. At this point, you can actually put in the 2 screws here and here that you took out earlier to get the old light housing out and put the new one in. So those can go back in. So now at this point, I'm not actually going to put anything back together. I want to make sure everything works with the wiring before everything goes back together. And I'm not going to dive too deep into the wiring because that can be kind of different depending on what your setup is. So essentially I'm going to run what they sent, which is the Dynamics wires. And essentially they make it really easy, just 2 plugs. That's the switch, and then the connection points for the battery terminal.